in this 21st century, Kenya needs to be competitively positioned to make sure 47 counties are able to compete in terms of getting investment opportunities and be able to provide opportunities for companies that would like to set up. Now, forget about supporting companies that will require commercial power supply, but domestic power supply in Wajir and in places like Mandera is extremely unreliable and extremely inadequate. And for us to be able to make sure the counties can realize their full potential, it is critical that the ministry concerned is called upon to give us a roadmap to making sure all counties that are dependent upon diesel generators can move to solar generated power, renewable energy, in order to make sure that the dependency on diesel generators and the breakdowns can be mitigated. I rise to support and congratulate Senator Abbas for bringing this motion to the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Wamatinga.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I also rise to support this very, very important motion, because we know that Kenya has, in the last couple of years, tried so much to break away to become an industrialist country. However, Mr. Speaker, sir, with the cost of power as currently it is, it would be almost impossible to achieve that. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is a common knowledge that our neighboring countries like Ethiopia produce power at a far much cheaper rate as compared to Kenya power. However, it is also very interesting to note, Mr. Speaker, sir, that Kenyan does produce power at a cost of 5 shillings and 40 cents per kilowatt, compared to the independent power producers, some of them who are selling to Kenya Power at 173 shillings per the same unit. Mr. Speaker, sir, the question arises why we as a country have come up with legal framework by imposing taxes on solar panels, which are supposed to be zero rated, but it is done in a very punitive way that you have to pay the taxes first and then claim later from KRA. Mr. Speaker, sir, counties like Wajir, Marsabit, Mandela, which are known to be very, very hot areas, would enjoy and actually achieve maximum resource by using solar power. This would be in addition to the fact that, Mr. Speaker, sir, we may not need long transmission lines moving from one county to the next if we came up with localized solutions like solar power, where each county should be encouraged to set up a solar farm and supply power within its locality. This, Mr. Speaker, sir, in the new administration of the Kenya Kwanza government, with the new PPPs, this would be actually a very, very positive step that we can encourage the counties to take, so that the dependency on Kenya Power, which fluctuates every time, will come to an end. Mr. Speaker, sir, I being the chair of the Energy Committee, I know that there have been a lot of problem challenges, some of them sanctioned by a lack of transparency, lack of accountability, and most unfortunately, lack of commitment from Kenya Power. If you look at the money that they make from supply of power, they are already making too much that they do not mind going to such counties that are outliers to make sure that they supply power. Mr. Speaker, sir, if the government and indeed the ministry undertakes to overhaul power generation strategy, we need to look at more renewable power, and such counties like Wajir, Marsabit, Mandela, Turkana could benefit a lot from solar energy. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is also not lost to this House that we did start a solar wind power project in Turkana, in Marsabit, the Lake Turkana windmill power station, which we know that, Mr. Speaker, sir, it costed the taxpayer a lot of money because the conceptualization of the project, even before completion of the project, there was already a power purchase agreement. Mr. Speaker, sir, you know that this agreement was supposed to make Kenyans pay for the power regardless of whether they're using it or not. Mr. Speaker, sir, these are things that we must look at. These are things that we must address. And the fact that we are now moving to renewable energy, green energy, we must also come up with a framework that enables such counties that enjoy a lot of sunshine to use solar power as a localized solution. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, maybe it's the high time we do ask the question whether we indeed want to continue with the monopoly of Kenya Power if we want to industrialize this country, because a lack of accountability and transparency, Mr. Speaker, sir, has made this country lose a lot of money. And I see migration of investors from Kenya to Ethiopia and to other neighboring countries where power is far much cheaper. Mr. Speaker, sir, if you look at some times back, we used to have a lot of flower farms in Kenya. Most of them have migrated to Ethiopia where power is affordable. If we want to stop this migration of investors to other countries, we must also address the issue of the cost of power. I therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, want to thank the Senator for coming up with this very, very important statement. And we as a House must also start thinking about what localized solutions we can get for our counties, because we do not enjoy homogeneity of the counties and their backgrounds. And I think some of them would be doing very, very well if we came up with a localized solution. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I support.
Senator Murgo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to also put my ideas and support the Senator for Wajir for this motion. Mr. Speaker, Kenya Power or power is a component that is very essential in many, many ways in life. You talk of lighting houses, lighting streets and everywhere, and also keeping of maybe medicine in hospitals, in private sectors, and in many ways. Needless to say, the fact that it enhances industries and in many ways. But the situation and the monopoly that there is in Kenya Power is probably the situation that is putting us places such as Wajir. You can imagine even West Pokot, where there is power plant in Takwel, and yet electricity is not everywhere in West Pokot. There is only a small percentage, probably around Kapenguria, but the rest of the county is not lit because of the sluggishness that there is in Kenya Power and monopoly that they have, so that they are not competing with anyone for supply of power. So I think it is time that there is creation of a competitor for supply of power, so that Kenya Power does not sleep. And even some of their workers and agents corruptly take advantage and manipulate and exaggerate rates such that they make money on their own, so that they enrich themselves. And it is because of the monopoly that Kenya Power has on supply of power. There should be a way of pushing Kenya Power to be able to cover everywhere, not where they have been and not where they wish, but to make sure that they are in all the counties, so that our counties are lit and supply of power is everywhere, not in a few places. And so my opinion is that Kenya Power should also look for alternatives that can light up some of the counties, and like somebody has mentioned already, sunshine that there is in the northern belt or districts should be made use of, so that there is an alternative of power rather than depending on electricity only. And therefore, I rise to support the motion. Thank you.
Senator Ledama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the statement by Senator Abbas Mohammed on the issue of electricity. Mr. Speaker, it is not only in Wajir County that we have constant power outbreak. And I think it's about time for us to start thinking seriously. And I'm happy that I'm a member of the Energy Committee, and I share the sentiments of my chairperson in terms of looking at other alternative sources of energy. As I stand here, Mr. Speaker, on a daily basis, I generate about 60 to 70 kilowatts of electricity using solar. When you look at the issues that has been raised by my colleague, there's one which is very sensitive, which is the issue of carbon emission. And I think it's about time, and particularly all pastoralists and everyone else who live in this country, this year has been the hardest year for pastoralists and people who live in the coast on the issue of drought. In developing nations, they are now introducing carbon taxes so that it can be able to deter people from, producing a lot of carbon emission. Because when there's a lot of carbon emission being produced in the air, there's so much which is hidden, or what is referred to as unintended consequences. So, Mr. Speaker, this statement is something that I wish that my committee would go further and try to understand from the government policy, from the Ministry of Energy, why is it so difficult for counties like Wajir to rely 100% on solar? The issue that has been raised here, Mr. Speaker, is when you hear that there are faulty generators. These generators are on a daily basis, creating a lot of carbon emissions in the air. They are creating a lot of noise. They are polluting the environment. So I think we need to be realistic here. Using generators in Wajir, using generators in Marsabit, using generators in Garissa, using generators even in some parts of rural Narok, will not make any sense to be able to generate electricity. Why not invest in solar energy? Remove the taxes completely on solar panels so that you encourage more people to be able to come and invest and generate electricity. Mr. Speaker, one of the other issues that I would like my committee on energy to include in this statement is to try and come up with a date. This time, not the policy, but the date when the new government will liberalize the energy sector 100%. So that a county like Wajir, the governor of that county can be able to introduce subsidies or even maybe incentives for people who can be able to come and generate power using solar and distribute that power there. We need now to think about other mini power generating plants. There's no point of us relying on Kenya Power to be able to be the only off-taker of power. So, Mr. Speaker, I support this statement, and I hope that we can be serious to ensure that we resolve this issue. The points that Senator has raised, the issue of carbon emission, is something which is very serious. I hope members of the National Assembly who could be watching this proceeding today will think of introducing a carbon tax. This will be able to put some sanity there. And that carbon tax should actually be put on Kenya Power so that they can stop using those generators. Number two, also the government should come up with incentives. Do away completely with the taxes on solar panels. It is ridiculous to put taxes on solar panels, yet we do not have power in this country. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Senator Omtata.
Honorable Speaker, I stand to support the motion And in doing so, I would only like to point out that Kenya Power is a very strange animal because of the percentages that it has played around with in shareholding. It masquerades as a parastatal. In reality, it's not under the control of government. It's controlled by individuals, some who have got even monopoly shareholding. And as such, being a strategic organ, electricity being a strategic sector, just like roads, Kenya Power is virtually controlled by individuals, and the Kenyan state has got no mechanism for intervening in the power sector. So it will be important either for the government to take steps to renationalize Kenya Power, or to set up a serious distribution company that can carry out the mandate of Kenya Power. You will find that even new companies coming up are hamstrung to distribute electricity because Kenya Power tends to claim that the national grid is a private property. The national grid is not a private property. It was built using taxpayers' money. And why Kenya Power should lock out its competitors from using the national grid is something that the government needs to address. We also have the question of PPAs, power purchase agreements, which are skewed against the Kenyan voter, the Kenyan taxpayer or consumer of electricity. And these are the things that have pushed the cost of power through the roof in Kenya to a point whereby we cannot compete. In supporting this motion, I call upon the government of Kenya to get serious with the question of electricity in this country. To either, and to get mechanisms for having tools with which they can intervene in the market to control and regulate the cost of power. Without doing so, we are staring at a total failure of our economy because the cost of inputs, the cost of production is bad. And if you go to some areas like Western Province and in particular in Busia, we can hardly talk of Kenya Power and lighting. We talk of Kenya Power and darkness. Because most of the time you are in the dark. It keeps on going out, it keeps on going off. Where there's a small, where you have some small shower, the lights go off. And then you also find that the way they have laid out their distribution network is such that where they are not able to localize power failure, so that if there's a small problem in one area, the entire region is cast into darkness. You wonder what their engineers are doing instead of coming up with a distribution network whereby they can isolate a local problem and deal with it, and the other sectors continue running. Mr. Speaker, sir, recently you saw the suckers around transformers that were allegedly imported into this country, and they were obsolete. They could not be deployed. Nobody has been held accountable for that. And so it looks like the cartels that are controlling electricity in this country or the power sector are untouchable. As regards renewable energy, we must realize that yes, the future is in renewable energy, but currently what we have and what is working is the forms of energy, the traditional forms of energy, which include power. So as much as we push for solar power, wind power, and for the removal of taxes in these renewable sources of energy, we must realize that a big chunk of our electricity in this country is renewable. We have electricity from geothermal, we have electricity from hydroelectric. And I think under President Kibaki, he had made a conscious effort to eliminate these private power generators, these diesel-based generators. It is the Jubilee government which brought them back. So I would urge that the government goes back to what the government of national unity did. The government of President Mwai Kibaki and the Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga did to rein in these private power generators who have signed very skewed PPAs, some which we pay up to 36 billion shillings a year without even getting a unit of electricity. But the contracts are there. I also think that the PPAs must be subject to Article 10 of the Constitution. There has to be transparency, there has to be public participation on the PPAs. Kenya Power cannot just sit in a dark room with somebody, sign a PPA, and condemn Kenyans to pay. Right now, Mr. Speaker, sir, if you look at your bill for power, it clearly shows that you pay a very small fraction for the power you consume. The rest is going to make some people rich. And it is not acceptable that under the cover of the law, Kenyan taxpayers and Kenyan consumers of electricity are exploited. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I stand to support the motion and pray that it passes. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, I have noted the way we handle statements and requests for statements under Standing Order 52 and Standing Order 53. And from the way a member requests for statement, we proceed to debate. And we shouldn't be debating a request for a statement. We ought to debate the statement when tabled by the relevant committee. And therefore, going forward, when Honorable Senator rises to request for a statement, unless there's something lacking and the Senator wishes the relevant committee to consider as it retires to consider that request, then you can rise and make an additional request for more areas that maybe the Honorable Senator who is requesting has left out. Because as it stands now, we're basically debating a non-existent statement. So as we proceed, kindly bear in mind, if we do that, we'll use very little time to do that, and then we will be able to use more time when these statements are tabled, and we can proceed to debate them. So, Honorable Osotsi, what is your point of order? And what is your point of order? And I hope
Speaker,
it's not,
sir, the tradition.
I hope it's not referring
Yes,
to the
what I want to say, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that the tradition of this House is that we have not been debating those statements. Once you request for a statement, it is referred to the committee. The committee might summon you to discuss that statement, and after that, it doesn't come back to the House. That is what has been happening for the last 5 years or 6 years I've been here. So unless maybe, because the issues that maybe have been mentioned in the statement are the issues that the member thinks or is of his opinion that are of concern to him. But now the members maybe want to enrich that statement, and they may not get an opportunity to come back to the House for further debate. As last week, the Honourable Senator for Embu raised an issue about over-taxation of Mugoka vehicles that are going to Mombasa. And as a Senator for Mombasa, it was of concern to me. So if we are not allowed to ride on those statements, then we shall be missing some issues that will be of great help to this House and to the country in general. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Faki, if you listen to me carefully, because I'm afraid you didn't, I said if an honorable senator stands to request for a statement, and if you want to enrich it, not debate it, enrich it, you will get an opportunity. But what I have noticed going for the few days we have been handling these statements, we're basically debating. We are not enriching these statements. So for enriching statements, that is allowed. And when you feel the statement is inadequate and you want to add another component to it for the committee to consider, that is allowed. Honorable Senator Osotsi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to request for a statement regarding the drought situation and the relief food distribution. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order number 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations on the drought situation and the relief food distribution in Kenya. Mr. Speaker, in the statement, the committee should do the following. 1, state the reasons for the failure by the national government to declare the prevailing drought and famine as a national disaster, despite over 4.5 million Kenyans facing starvation. 2, explain why the government has reverted to the physical food distribution system that is riddled with procurement and logistical challenges and prone to abuses instead of recommended cash transfers to the affected population. 3, Mr. Speaker, explain the input of the Directorate of Social Protection in relief food distribution, noting that the Directorate has over the years developed good databases for vulnerable beneficiary groups with strong mechanisms of identification, registration, and vetting of vulnerable households, and explain the reasons for bypassing the Directorate in food distribution program in favor of the Kenya National Trading Corporation and other agencies. 4, outline the measures put in place by the government, if any, to promote drought preparedness and alternative climate resilient livelihood option as a long-term sustainable measure to promote vulnerable population from drought. 5, state the amount of funds allocated by the national and county government to tackle the situation, as well as money donated by donor agencies and well-wishers, including private sector, to help mitigate the drought situation across the country, stating accountability measures put in place to prevent pilferage of the said fund. 6, explain the basis of funds being withdrawn from the consolidated fund to fund purchase of relief food without appropriation by Parliament, noting that any expenditure above 1 billion Kenya shillings must be sanctioned by Parliament under supplementary estimates, hence necessitating the need to declare the drought a national disaster. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, call for the audit of the relief food distribution program and the drought mitigation funds by the Office of the Auditor General to ascertain whether the funds have been utilized in the best interest of the public. Mr. Speaker, if you allow me to say 1 or 2 things.
You may not be able to do that.
Thank you, very well, very well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Senator, yes, what is your point of order, Honorable Boni Kulala?
Mr. Speaker, whereas I thank the Senator of Vihiga for that very important statement, but Mr. Speaker, is it in order to state categorically
that the money being spent is not being drawn in accordance with the government financial regulations and procedures, without confirming to this House that the money we are spending is not from the disaster fund. Because in our budgets over the years, we have a disaster, an emergency fund and we have a disaster fund. Without that proof, can we allow him, Mr. Speaker, to be seen to be in order when he has not tabled anything to show that the government is spending from right, left, center? Could Mr. Speaker, could he substantiate that before we accept the statement?
Honorable Senator Osotsi, you requested for a statement, and in that statement it will be upon the committee to investigate such matters, and therefore stating in finality will not give room to the committee to investigate that matter. And I think on the issue of where the funds are drawn, whether legal or otherwise, that you should leave it to the committee to investigate and report. Honorable Senator Cherangei, please make your request for statement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you are aware, Kenyans from diaspora in the month of February, March sent over 80 billion Kenya shillings, and the phasing out of the current passport will end or 31st November 2022. Mr. Speaker, in pursuant to Standing Order 53.1, seek a statement from the Standing Committee on National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations on the issue of lack of A-series passports at the Department of Immigration. In the statement, Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee should, 1, state the reasons for the shortage of A-series passports, that is 32 pages, at the immigration offices, hence forcing applicants to pay Kenya shillings 7,550 shillings for C-series, which is 64 pages, which are only ones available at the moment at the Immigration Department. Number 2, Mr. Speaker, explain why Kenyans who had earlier paid Kenya shillings 4,550 shillings for the A-series passports are being forced to pay an additional 3,000, and yet they had, while applying, made their choices or the choice on the basis of information available on the e-citizen website provided. Mr. Speaker, the third, state or provide a comprehensive report on the exact number of Kenyans who have been forced to adjust their payments and what amount of extra money has been collected from 4,500 shillings to be upgraded for 3,000 shillings, which comes in total to 7,550 shillings. Mr. Speaker, finally, state when the Department of Immigration under the Ministry of National Government and Interior will resolve this matter once and for all and allow Kenyans to enjoy the services. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Next order.
Order number 8, election of members to the East African Legislative Assembly.
Honorable Senators, as you may be aware, pursuant to Rule 15, one of the East African Legislative Assembly elections, election of members of the Assembly Rules 2017, the clerks of the Houses of Parliament, who pursuant to Rule 2 of the said rules are the presiding officers, by Gazette Notice number 14039 of 16th November 2022, and in the Daily Nation and the Standard newspapers of 16th November 2022, appointed today, Thursday, 17th November 2022, as the day for the election of members of the East African Legislative Assembly. I would like to provide guidance to the House on the procedure that we shall follow in conducting the election of members of the East African Legislative Assembly, EALA. The election exercise will be undertaken pursuant to the East African Legislative Assembly elections, election of members of the Assembly, Rules 2017. Honorable Senators, the election shall be conducted here in the Senate chamber and in the National Assembly chamber, being the venues appointed for this purpose by the presiding officers. In accordance with Rule 2 of the East African Legislative Assembly elections, election of members of the Assembly Rules 2017, the Clerk of the Senate and the Clerk of the National Assembly are the presiding officers, while the Speaker of the Senate and the Speaker of the National Assembly are the returning officers in the respective houses. For purposes of the election, a voter is defined in Rule 2 as a member of the National Assembly or a member of the Senate. Honorable Senators, with respect to the conduct of the election in the Senate, Rule 16.1 of the East African Legislative Assembly elections, election of members of the Assembly Rules 2017, requires the presiding officer to prepare and at the appointed time for the election to issue to each senator one ballot paper on which shall be written in alphabetical order the names of all duly nominated candidates, their gender, age, and county. The candidates have been clustered under the headings of the names of the respective categories of nomination in accordance with Rule 5 and 9. I confirm that ballot papers have been prepared in the manner required. Voting will be done through roll call, where the clerk will call out the names of senators in alphabetical order. Honorable Senators, senators who are present, on signing the ballot issuance register, which is available with the presiding officer, will be issued with one ballot paper. Each senator, on receiving a ballot paper, which has been duly stamped, shall proceed to one of the ballot booths, which are located on either side of the chair, and secretly record his or her votes by putting a mark in a space provided on the ballot paper for recording of votes against the names of the preferred candidates as clustered. Honorable Senators, Rule 6.1 of the East African Legislative Assembly elections, election of members of the Assembly Rules 2017, provides for the allocation ratio for each party, which shall be 3 times the figure arrived at by multiplying the number of elected members of that party by such number as the Joint Select Committee shall determine, and dividing the result by the total number of elected members of Parliament. As such, kindly note that the ballot paper is divided into 2 clusters. That is Kenya Kwanza Alliance and the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition Party. The Kenya Kwanza Alliance Coalition cluster has 15 candidates, while the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition Party cluster has 12 candidates. In respect of the Kenya Kwanza Alliance Coalition Partner cluster, which consists of 15 candidates, a senator will be entitled to vote for not more than 5 candidates. The persons to be declared elected in respect of the Kenya Kwanza Alliance cluster shall be 5 candidates with the highest number of votes, who must include at least 2 candidates of either gender. In respect to the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition Party cluster, which consists of 12 candidates, a senator will be entitled to vote for not more than 4 candidates. The persons to be declared elected in respect of the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Alliance Coalition Party cluster shall be 4 candidates with the highest number of votes, who must include at least 1 candidate of either gender. Honorable Senators, please bear in mind that in accordance with Rule 17.3, a voter can only cast as many votes as the number of the total candidates to be elected. In this case, 9 candidates. Honorable Senators, you may walk in. Take your seats, honorable senators, so that we can proceed. Senator Tabitha. Kindly take your seat. Senator Tabitha, acquaint yourself with the standing orders. When the chair is upstanding, you take your seat. Honorable senators, it is also important to note that in reckoning the candidates to be declared elected, Section 4.4 of the East African Legislative Assembly Elections Act 2011 requires that at least 1/3 of the elected members shall reflect either gender. Honorable senators, let me also clarify that under Rule 17.4, where a voter casts more votes than the number of candidates required to be elected, the ballot paper of that voter shall be regarded as spoiled. Rule 17.5 provides that a ballot paper shall not be regarded as spoiled where the voter casts a number of votes that falls below the number of candidates to be elected. In accordance with Rule 17.6, a senator who accidentally spoils a ballot paper while the voting is in progress is entitled, on surrendering the spoiled ballot paper to the presiding officer, to be issued with another ballot paper in place of the spoiled one. Honorable senators, after marking the ballot paper and while still in the booth, you are required to fold your ballot paper and proceed to deposit it in the ballot box placed on the table of the Senate and resume your seat. Honorable senators, as required by Rule 18.1, once all senators have cast their votes, I will appoint 2 senators, one from either side of the political coalitions, to be counting agents for the candidates. In accordance with Rule 18.2, the presiding officer shall, in the presence of the counting agents, count and tally the votes cast. Honorable senators, pursuant to the provisions of Rule 19, when the votes have been counted and the results of the election ascertained, A, the presiding officer shall record the results of the tally and report to the Senate the results of the election together with the number of votes recorded for each candidate under the respective clusters. B, the returning officer shall thereafter send a message to the National Assembly communicating the results of the Senate, which the Speaker of the National Assembly, as the other returning officer, will announce to the National Assembly. And the presiding officer of the National Assembly will likewise report the results of the National Assembly elections to the National Assembly, and the returning officer of the National Assembly will send a message to the Senate communicating the National Assembly election results. Honorable senators, considering the number of members in the National Assembly, the election exercise will most likely take longer in the National Assembly than in the Senate. In the period before conclusion of the voting in the National Assembly and transmission of both the National Assembly election results and the combined results of the elections conducted in both houses to the Senate, we shall proceed with other business scheduled in today's order paper. Upon receipt of the message from the National Assembly on the results of the National Assembly and the combined results from both houses of Parliament, I will proceed to announce the results to the Senate. In the event that there will be need to suspend the proceedings of the Senate for the convenience of the House, a determination will be made at that time. Honorable senators, let me also point out that in the event of a tie between 2 or more candidates amongst those with the highest votes in any of the clusters, the process will be repeated in both houses between the respective candidates. As I conclude, I would like to remind honorable senators that during the entire election exercise, the East African Legislative Assembly election of members of the Assembly Rules 2017, and the Senate standing orders are applicable and will be enforced by the Speaker as necessary. Finally, Honorable Senators, I wish to draw to your attention to Standing Order 91 on decorum during division, which require, among others, that senators shall maintain order in the Senate and shall be in the designated seats and shall remain seated until the results is announced. That said, Honorable Senators, we will forthwith commence the elections, and I now direct the presiding officer to proceed. I thank you. What is your point of order, Honorable Kalwale?
Mr. Speaker, it's just for further clarity and for avoidance of doubt. I have not recently read the rules that you are referring to. Because we are men and women of this world, Mr. Speaker, I would appeal to you that if the rules don't so state, then please, because we are going to have our exercise end earlier than the National Assembly, do not send a message there before they conclude theirs. The temptation can naturally be that upon knowing the outcome here, and probably a preferred candidate, in quotes, is missing 2 votes, can be assisted there to unfairly defeat another one. I would request, Mr. Speaker, unless the rules so say, that you sit on our message until they have concluded, then you exchange messages at the same time. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Kalal Boni, the message that will be sent to the National Assembly shall not be read until they've concluded their voting. It shall not be read midway until they have concluded their voting. And therefore, it shall not in any way prejudice the process of voting in the National Assembly. They will not know the results until the very tail end when they've concluded theirs. Let's proceed. What is the point of order, Chiranke?
Mr. Speaker, just so that it allows the House to move with speed and also assist. I don't know, I didn't hear your directions that the bars may be drawn so that we avoid our people maybe standing or the procedure, because maybe I need guidance that when such matter, which is very urgent and important, should allow the bars be drawn, or this one is different, because normally, Mr. Speaker, whenever we go to division, the directions and the tradition of the House is normally that we draw the bar so that it allows easy and seamless movement and allow non-interference from outside, Mr. Speaker, because strangers might end up walking into the House. Mr. Speaker, I think that we need direction so that I can see the Deputy Speaker, the Minority Whip, and others standing at the doorway, and they are smiling, which means they are transacting serious business, not that one we're standing, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Chiranke, we only draw the bar when we go to division. We are here together. Order, Senator Kalwale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just to augment the point raised by the Senator of Nandi, I'm equally surprised, Mr. Speaker, that we are going into division. And yet the division bell has not been rung. I would have expected it be rung This is a solemn, very important process for members, wherever they are in the precincts, to come to the House. The bar is drawn, and we start voting, Mr. Speaker. Please guide the House.
Senator Boni Kalwale, this is not a division. When we get there, the division bell will be rung. We're not there yet. Yes, presiding officer, proceed with the election exercise.
Honorable Senators, before you on the table is a ballot box, which I think which will be displayed. It is empty. Please show. It will now be sealed. When called out, you will please come to the table. You will sign the register. After signing the register, you will be given a ballot paper, which will be stamped, and then you can proceed to either side. If you are sitting on my left, please come to the left where you will sign the register and proceed to the ballot, to the booths that are on the left. If you are sitting on the right, please come to the right-hand side and sign the register, get the ballot paper, and proceed to the booths on the right. Where's the register? So we are ready to begin. I will call out the names. Abbas Sheikh Mohammed. Bishwa yuko kwanza. There is a pen. There are pens at the table. You don't need to find one, please. Abdurrahman Miraj Abdullahi. Adan Dulo Fatuma. Asige Crystal Kegehi. Boy Isa Juma. Honorable Senators, in accordance with the rules, I have a spoiled ballot paper, so I am issuing another ballot paper. So, andika. Gerard K. Samson. Gerard K. Samson. Cheriot Aaron Kipkirui. Chesang Alan Kiprotich. Chesang Alan Kiprotich. Chute Mohammed Said. An empty box. Ekomwa James Lomenen. Ekomwa James Lomenen. Haji Abdul Mohammed. Kajwang Moses Otieno. Kamar Margaret Jepkoech. Kamar Margaret Jepkoech. I need to know when it's empty. But she doesn't know. They don't know. There are two people right now. Oh, you decided you are. Kamau Joseph Githuku. Kathuri Murungi. Keroche Tabitha Karanja. Halwale Boni. Please go to the left. Please go to the left. Kibwana Hamida Ali. Honorable Senators, there is a spoiled ballot paper, so we'll be issuing another one. Kipkiror William Cheptumo. Korir Joyce Chepkoech. Korir Joyce Chepkoech. Lelegwe Steve Ltumbesi. Lemaletian Hezena. Maanzo Daniel Kitonga. This way, to the right. Madzayo Stewart Mwachiru. Mandago Jackson Kiplagat. Mandago Jackson Kiplagat. Mbogwa George Mungai. Mbogwa George Mungai. Medhu John Mohea. Mogeni Eric Okongo. Fall. Mohammed Shakila Abdallah. Montet Betty Batuli. Muma Catherine Muyeka. Mundigi Alexander Munyi. Mundigi Alexander Munyi, Mungatana Danson Buya. Morango James Kamau. Mudhama Agnes Kavindu. Mutinda Maureen Tabitha.